Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Music Community Podcast. I am your co-host, Random Girl Singing, here with Dan Drumstone. Doc Bizzle is out today, but we are really excited to have a very special guest with us. This is Ryan Kairalla. He is an entertainment lawyer, an artist advocate, and also the author of the book Break the Business and its podcast, Break the Business. He is basically here to help independent musicians and help us better navigate and understand the law and how it pertains to live streaming musicians. And he's also here to let us pick his brain a little bit about all of the little things about fair use, copyright, and really where we stand on Twitch doing covers and dealing with that kind of stuff, and also how live streaming is impacting the music industry. Welcome, Ryan. We are so happy to have you on.
Yeah, welcome.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you all so much for inviting me.
Yeah, this is a very kind of unspoken thing that pretty much everyone that streams music has in the back of our head. You know, like, am what I doing? Oh, is it okay? And you know, will I ever get in trouble? So if we can clear up some stuff today or just spread some knowledge, it's going to be really exciting to hear from an expert on this subject. But tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your background?
Sure. I live in Miami, Florida. I've lived here for most of my life, and I'm a practicing entertainment lawyer down here, but I'm also licensed to practice law in addition to the state of Florida in New York and California, and hopefully DC in the next couple of weeks if the paperwork continues to check out, God willing. I practice in the areas of education law and entertainment law. On the entertainment side, I focus a lot of work in the music industry, and particularly I spend a lot of my time with independent musicians. They're very much a passion of mine. I got into helping independent musicians almost by accident. When I was growing up in high school and college, I thought I was going to be a record executive and work at a record company because, you know, that's what all the movies, you know, about the music business were, you know, and I was going to be one of those guys. And when I started out in my entertainment practice, the thing that I found myself doing the most in the early part of my career was I would be reviewing record contracts from artists. You know, a young, talented artist would come up to me and say, "Hey, I have this contract in my hand, and they say if I sign it, I'm going to be a big, big star. Can you look at it for me?" I'll take a look at it and go, "Oh my God, this is a contractual dumpster fire. This is a big, big mess." You know, and then I'll say, "You can't." And then, you know, and to this day, I've yet to read a record deal that I would ever advise a client to sign. They're all disasters, and it was just becoming so demoralizing for me to read one terrible record contract after another and know that I would never have the ability to negotiate the agreement and make it better because the artist usually had no leverage, and the major labels were so stuck in their old way of doing things that they were never going to change. And I saw so many clients and friends of mine get their lives ruined by the record label model, you know, losing their money, losing their copyrights, you know, losing their careers. And I figured there had to be a better way to do this. And so I sort of sought out to talk with independent musicians and figure out how, you know, and just, you know, got a bunch of them together and just asked them, how are you able to achieve success? And I was able to research a lot of what they talked about. And I got to talk with, you know, people who work with Amanda Palmer and people who work with Keena Grannis and all these great indie artists. And I took a bunch of those interviews, and those were the basis of a book I wrote called Break the Business, Declaring Your Independence and Achieving True Success in the Music Industry, which is basically all about how to achieve success on your own terms as a musician without a record label. I take a lot of the advice that I got from those indie artists and their supporters, and I also add in some information about why record deals are dangerous. We actually walk through a record contract section by section and talk about why they can destroy your career. And you know, it took off a little bit. A lot of artists got interested in what I had to say. And so the book begat the podcast, where each week I have the opportunity to speak with a whole bunch of talented independent musicians and some of the other business people in the industry that work with independent musicians. And I get a lot of, and we get a lot of advice from them each week to help indie artists like all of you move your careers forward. And it's been a very rewarding aspect of what I do in my legal practice. It's really fun to work with you guys. You are innovative and you're exciting and you're interesting. And give it 5 or 10 years and you guys are going to dominate the industry. And I am so thrilled that I get to even play a small part in that for you guys.
Oh, we're honored to be able to talk to you. You know, when I got into music, and I know a lot of people, you know, you're kind of innocent. You know, it's just you start off and I'm going to, you know, make songs and I'm going to write or I'm just going to perform. And then you do start to take it serious. And then this business side of it starts to come into the equation. And a lot of people aren't prepared for that, don't even think about that until it does come up. And then they're like, what is this contract? It looks like, you know, it's 30 pages, you know, of just that we don't understand. And, you know, what are royalties? What's copyright? What's publishing? Like none of that made sense to me when I was, you know, 18, driving around in a band, you know, in this van, you know, none of that made sense to any of us. We just wanted to play music. But I do remember, you know, the first time someone looked at, you know, offers that we would get from record labels and they're like, this is terrible. This is like the work, you know, because we got excited, like you said, in the movies when you get, you know, if someone's like, all right, here's a record deal and they offer it to you, you get all excited. You're like, oh man, this is it. We did it.
I made it.
We beat it. Yeah, we beat the game. And then, you know, you realize that it's not what you expect.
What are
you find out your princess is in another castle.
Yeah.
Wow, did I date myself with that video game reference? I was trying to be cool with the cool video game people, and then I quote a video game from 1985. Good job.
You're perfect.
It's still good.
Perfect. I mean, what are these contracts? Explain what are the types of tricks? You know what I mean? What are the bad deals that you're talking about? Just give us a couple examples.
Oh, sure. So there are. Thank you, Zach Sloan. He's a friend of our podcast who appreciated my dinosaur video game reference. Well, there are a lot of clauses that you'll see in a typical record deal that are problematic. And the first is just the fact that in most record deals, you don't own the thing that you recorded, even though you put all the blood, sweat, and tears into making your record. And even though you're effectively paying for that record because they're going to recoup out of your royalties the costs of recording that record before you see any money, the record company owns it. So you pay for something and then somebody else gets to own the thing that you paid and worked for, and they get to make all the money that comes off of the ways that they can make money off your record. The licensing, the selling it in stores, the downloading, the streaming, whatever they're going to do with it. And they're going to pay you a small pittance of a royalty. In many cases, that royalty can be as low as, less than $1 per album that you sell. And sometimes it's, less than 10 cents for, a download on iTunes. And remember, you don't actually see any of those tiny royalties until those royalties recoup all the money that the label spends on your behalf. So you're paying off a debt you're never going to repay, and you don't get to own the thing that you created. And now in the last 10 years, we've seen this new provision called a 360 provision, which is just the nastiest thing I've ever seen, because that corrupt model that I was talking about, it at least worked 20 years ago, because most artists would say, okay, fine, I'm not making any money off my record deal, but it's cool because my stuff's getting played on the radio and people go watch me perform live, and so I make money off of live performances. Well, now in these 360 deals, the record label says, in addition to all the money we're taking from your records, we're also going to take 30% off the top of your live performances, of your merchandising. If you act in a movie or write a book, we're going to get 30% of that. And, you guys know as entrepreneurs, if somebody takes 30% of the top before costs are deducted, there's no money left for you at the end.
No.
And so, the labels have taken every piece of everything. And in this new industry where promoting your music can be close to free, creating your music can be close to free, distributing it can be close to free, and you have things like crowdfunding to pay for a lot of the things that record companies used to pay for, I'm wondering more and more, why do artists still have to sign on the dotted line?
Yeah. And I think that became apparent, probably the last 10, 12 years, maybe 15 years, I don't know. But it seemed like early 2000s, people started to realize, like, oh, with the internet, I don't need a radio station. And, especially now with YouTube and streaming services that have popped up. And iTunes was a big thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It felt like we had more power than ever as an artist.
Today's musicians almost take for granted what they had that we didn't have 20 years ago. I mean, can you imagine what a artist or a label or promotion company would have had to have paid 20 years ago to put your music on a platform that had a audience of 1 billion people? I mean, you pay millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars for that. And now all of you have it for free. It's called YouTube. It's called Twitch. And I mean, that's magnificent. And it gives artists like you, it levels the playing field. And that doesn't mean it's still not going to be really hard, because look, I'll be frank with you, the playing field is level, but it's level for everybody. And so now the marketplace is a lot more crowded, and it becomes more important for artists like you to be really on top of your marketing and really on top of your social media, and to create a steady stream of really good content, because now you have to cut through the clutter more than you ever have.
Yeah, absolutely. So on Twitch, let's just dive right into it if it's okay. A lot of folks don't have enough original material to play original songs for a 4-hour stream. Or maybe they don't write yet, but they're really excellent cover artists. Or maybe they play over a track of an existing song. And what comes into play with that as far as copyright goes? Is it okay for folks to be live streaming other people's works in their own interpretations? Is it okay for them to be playing instruments over top of a track? Where is the line here?
That's an excellent question. And, yes, I agree, Zach Solon. That was a good question. It's an excellent one. And it's one that a lot of musicians are wondering about. And frankly, it's a question that a lot of lawyers are still, wrangling through and baffling with. And a lot of companies like Twitch are still trying to sort through. But basically, to answer your question, you have to first understand the two copyrights that come into play when you hear a song somewhere. So when you hear a song on the radio, when you buy a song on iTunes, there's two copyrights that are being implicated. One is in the original song that you have written, written down on a sheet music or something like that. And then there is the sound recording, which is a separate copyright entirely, the sound recorded version of that original song. So if you are playing a backing track, if you're playing an actual recording on Twitch, there would be two sets of permissions you have to get. The person who owns the sound recording, which in many cases is a record company, because, as we said before, a lot of these artists are signing bad record deals where the label owns the masters. And then you have the person who owns the musical composition, which is usually a publishing company. Now, for you indie artists out there, the person who owns each of those copyrights is usually the same person. If you write your own songs and you record your own songs, you own all of it, and that makes the licensing a lot easier for others. But for most of the songs that people are playing on Twitch, there's two different copyright owners. And so when you're playing something, if you're just playing a recording on Twitch, you most likely aren't allowed to do that, because most of you are not reaching out to the record company to get the permission. You're not reaching out to the publishing company to get the permission. So in most cases, playing a actual recording on Twitch is a no-no. And as many of you have probably encountered, when you try to do that, your audio often gets muted because of Content ID. So that's scenario one. Now, scenario two is a cover. I've heard many wonderful covers on Twitch. A lot of my dearest friends play covers on Twitch all the time. And then when you're talking about a Twitch cover, now you're only implicating one copyright, because you're not using the recording anymore. Now you're just, doing a cover of the original song. But in most cases, you don't really have the right to do that either. And Twitch, and I hate to hate on Twitch, because I love this platform. I love what it's doing for artists. But Twitch has been less than impressive in how well it's communicated this point to its artists, because I've seen some terms of services pages on Twitch where it says you can't do covers unless you have the permission of the copyright holder for the musical composition. And then I've seen other terms of services on Twitch where it's a little more ambiguous. And so, to my knowledge, Twitch does not have the proper licenses from the copyright holders through, ASCAP and BMI and CSAC and things like that, to allow all of you artists to do covers on Twitch without the permission of the copyright holder. That being said, now you're probably wondering, well, crap, I've been covering stuff on Twitch forever. Am I about to go to copyright jail? There's no such thing as copyright jail. Don't worry. I see y'all freaking out. But more realistically, are you facing legal liability and legal penalties? And as a lawyer, I have to say, yes, you could be subject to damages if somebody were to sue you. But now, that's the traditional technical legal answer.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to tell you what will happen realistically, chances are nobody's coming after you if you are doing this little thing on Twitch, and you're not hurting anybody. Mm-hmm. In fact, a lot of artists even like when other artists do covers of their work because it helps promote them. And there have been several artists that have gone on record saying that they, wholly encourage covers on live streaming platforms and YouTube and things like that. But, for the most part, that's still something that's very up in the air. But if somebody were to discover your work and, it was an artist who didn't want you covering their work, or a publishing company that didn't want you covering the work, what's more likely to happen is not that you're going to get sued, but that Twitch is going to be served a DMCA takedown notice. And then Twitch, because it doesn't want to get sued, is going to mute your video, or they're going to delete your account, or they're going to do a strike against you depending on what platform it is. Mm-hmm. And so that's the way it works on Twitch. YouTube is a little different because YouTube has actually negotiated some amount of licenses with the copyright holders, and there are actually more songs that are able to be recorded that you can record on YouTube than Twitch. And in fact, there are even platforms available that allow you to make YouTube covers and get the licensing for them. There's a website called We Are the Hits. If you want to do YouTube covers, I highly recommend it. So this is a company that works with the publishing companies. It has a catalog of songs that you can cover. And if you do it through We Are the Hits, usually they'll stick a commercial in front of your YouTube video. And then that's how the person who owns the copyright gets paid. And you can do YouTube covers and even make a little bit of money yourself. To my knowledge, Twitch doesn't have that same kind of infrastructure yet. But I imagine as it grows and as it continues to become a great forum for musicians, it's only a matter of time, I think, before they kind of adopt something similar. Yeah. But in the meantime, you got to be careful. Copyright infringement is no joke.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it does, I saw someone in chat say, it's like the Wild West, in the sense that all these streaming platforms and the ability for millions of people to broadcast, how do they regulate that? How are they? It seems physically impossible to have eyes and ears on every stream at all times, but the algorithms that like YouTube will put in place and Twitch to mute audio and stuff like that, that's like the first step in, possibly something else down the line,
Well, I like to tell people that copyright law it's using 18th and 19th century law to regulate 21st century art. Yeah. And the law is woefully behind you guys, you young musicians, you're innovating so fast that, our really old system of law can't keep up with you. And, when the founding fathers created our system of copyright, they never contemplated a world where, millions of songs were going to be streamed on Twitch at any given time, and they had to figure out a way to regulate it. And so, the content ID system that a lot of these platforms use is getting more and more sophisticated. It's less and less able to detect covers, although sometimes I've heard that it can. But usually when you try to put up a sound recording, when you're just using somebody else's masters, that's when you're more likely to get caught by one of those detection systems.
Gotcha. So I have another question, something that's been asked in my channel a few times. I do a lot of original music, and sometimes I even write original music right there on stream or kick around ideas. And I've had quite a few people ask me, aren't you worried somebody's going to come steal your ideas? Implying that my music is not secure because I haven't taken some steps to protect it before introducing it on Twitch. However, doesn't copyright law cover me from the moment that I create the work?
That's an excellent question. So there's a lot going on there, and it's an important one, and it helps uncover some of the myths that exist about copyright. And so in terms of protecting your work, so to answer your last point, which was, when does a copyright take effect? And legally, you have a copyright with the protections of federal law from the moment that you, quote, fixate a work onto a tangible medium of expression. So the moment you write it down on a sheet of paper or record it onto a tape recorder, there I go making old references again, or memorializing whatever you've created on something that is tangible, you have a copyright that exists from that moment. So what that might mean in the streaming world is if all you're doing is streaming but not recording, then theoretically you might not have a copyright yet because it hasn't been fixed onto anything. But if you're recording that stream as well, then you do. Now, in terms of registering your work with the government, I'm glad that I have all of you listening here so I can spread this message far and wide. Register your copyrights. Even though you have a copyright that has the protections of federal law from the moment you fix a work onto a tangible medium of expression, it's still critical that you register your copyrights. It's very easy to do. You go to copyright.gov, you fill out a very simple form, you upload your work, you're done. It's $35, and you can actually register multiple works at the same time for that $135 price and save yourself some money. But if you don't register your copyright, your legal remedies if somebody does steal your work are limited. Under the copyright law, if somebody steals your work, you're normally entitled to what are called statutory damages, which are damages that are specifically written into the law. They range from as high, they can range as much as $250,000 or something like that per offense. So those are deterrents with real teeth if somebody steals your work. But if you don't have the registered copyright and all you have is just whatever you recorded onto a tape recorder, then you don't get the statutory damages. All you can get are actual damages. So that's actual damage that you can prove to a court that you've suffered because somebody stole your work. It's very hard to prove actual damages. So you're much better off registering your work. Plus, you can get attorney's fees if you have your work registered when somebody infringes it. So somebody else might have to pay the legal bill if they steal your work. So what I would recommend in your case is after you've recorded something, maybe when you have a bunch of songs together, just register them as a compilation work. And, you don't have to do it right afterward, but, maybe you get like a bunch, like 4, 5, 6 together, register them so that you have that registration so that if somebody, because, generally if you wait too long to register your work before somebody infringes on it, then you don't get the protection. So you want to make sure that you register those works before somebody infringes on it.
Awesome. We have a question in the chat about how do these laws translate internationally?
Ooh, that's a great question. And that gets to something else that we want to talk about with licenses. So I've heard people ask, well, why doesn't Twitch get like an ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC license so that, streamers can stream whatever music covers they want? And while that would be useful, it wouldn't solve the problem entirely because those services only work for the United States. Other countries have their own streaming societies, and so you'd have to get something that has international coverage. I believe YouTube does do that, where they've actually reached out to the PROs throughout the world to give you much more coverage than you would have. So, right. If you were to stream something out into the world, you could not only be in legal trouble here in the States, but in theory, you could be violating other countries' copyright law as well. I can't advise too much as to the extent of that because even though I've been licensed in a lot of places, none of them are outside of this country.
Yeah.
But could I sue somebody from another country? If, are there copyright laws? Do you suppose that they're so drastically different that people could take advantage of an artist elsewhere?
No, I mean, a lot of countries have very similar copyright laws. A lot of countries sign international treaties to kind of make their copyright laws very similar to each other. That being said, there are, if somebody in a faraway land infringes your work, your legal remedies might be limited because, how are you going to go after them? How are you going to get jurisdiction over them? And especially when you get into countries like China, which is sort of the land that copyright law forgot. In a lot of ways.
Yeah, right.
So the further you get out of the US of A, the more that your remedies are limited there. And it gets into something that I think is really kind of changing the industry as a whole, which is a lot of the ways that your generation is going to be making money is not from the direct sale of things that you have copywritten. I think music downloads, like selling downloads on iTunes, that's dying. In 5 to 10 years, it could be dead. We're already talking about shutting down the iTunes store.
Yeah, I think one of the guys here at the studio today was like, hey, did you hear iTunes is stopping the sale of
Yeah.
MP3s. And I was like,
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
like,
And well, because we're heading into a streaming industry,
mhm.
and for a lot of artists are upset about that. Some are cool with it, but for the most part, we just have to say, look, it is what it is. But what it means is, for a lot of artists, you're not going to make the same kind of money that you used to off of downloads. And so what's happening more and more is that we're going to become an industry where the actual sale, direct sale of your music recordings is not going to be where you make most of your money. It's going to be from your live shows or your live streaming shows. It's going to be from your merchandise. It's going to be from licensing your music in TV commercials and things like that. And so what that means is you might need to change your dynamic as an artist. It's no longer about keeping your music locked away so that other people can't listen to it unless they pay for it, but more it's about sending your music out into the world.
Mhm.
Getting as many people to listen to your music as possible, even if it's for free. So that you can build that fan base, build that tribe. Because once you have a fan base, a group of devoted diehards that are willing to buy your merchandise, go watch your live shows, tell TV commercials that they should put your music in their commercials, now you have something that you can really make money off. And the industry is not going to be about having 1 million fans buy your album. It's going to be about having 1,000 fans who want to buy everything you make, that are just so fanatically dedicated to you that, when you put out merchandise, they're going to want to buy it. When you go on tour, they're going to want to listen to you play. And so that might mean that these copyrights that we find to be so valuable, and we want to protect ourselves, we want to make sure nobody steals our work without our permission, we might be less interested in doing that because we might be more interested in just getting that music out into the world. Your music essentially becomes a TV commercial for you to bring people into your tent where they will buy more premium offerings from you, like supporting your crowdfunding campaigns and things like that.
Yeah. One thing that people talk about, like before streaming and all that was an option, people compare what we're doing to live performances. Like let's say Steph is playing, for the town that she lives in, she's playing a music festival or something, and she said, I'm going to cover an Alanis Morissette song. How does that compare to what we're doing on Twitch? Like a live cover, is it the same instance? Like would, in theory, Steph still need to, because you also hear like the venue needing to deal with it.
Yeah.
So many good questions here. I love it, man. Because I have to take so many, not so great questions from people all the time who just don't. But you guys are on top of your stuff. This is a great question, and you were sort of hinting at the answer there. The difference between playing an Alanis Morissette song, and thank you for giving me more old references, so I don't feel quite so old. The difference between playing an Alanis Morissette song at a live venue versus streaming an Alanis Morissette cover on Twitch is that the live venue has almost assuredly purchased blanket performance licenses from ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC that allow artists like you to play all of the catalog of Alanis Morissette without violating any copyright law. So they're covering you in terms of the license there. A lot of venues don't get those licenses, and they can usually get in trouble with the performance rights organizations, but most venues know about this, and they'll purchase the licenses so that you're not going to get in any trouble there. Mm-hmm. Twitch does not have those same kind of permissions.
Yeah. Okay. I just assumed it was a very similar license, that they would have to purchase, or
it would be, but I imagine for Twitch it'd be a lot more expensive. Because the PROs, they're going to charge you based on the size of the audience. So if you're a little coffee shop, they're not going to charge you as much as you're, say, a live streaming platform with tens of millions of subscribers.
Yeah.
And how would they even do that anyway? Wouldn't it have to be after the fact, after they see how many people were actually there experiencing the performance?
Well, right. It'd be very hard for them to assess. And it's not something that, presumably it's not something that Twitch could just kind of walk in the door and purchase. There'd have to be a long negotiation. Facebook just, I believe, closed a deal with the record labels and some of the publishing companies to allow people like you to live stream covers on Facebook Live. And I imagine that deal was the product of a rather extensive amount of negotiation on the part of both parties, or all the parties, I should say. And it takes a long time.
Yeah, because all the publishing companies and labels, like you said, the ones that own the rights to that music, they're looking for ways to make money now too, because the industry is changing so much. So, something like a deal with Facebook, I'm assuming they would have made off pretty well for the intended trajectory of where live streaming is going. Over the next 5-10 years, just imagine what it could be. It could all change. It could be something completely different, but it changes so fast.
I mean, and that's exactly right. I mean, it's such an exciting time to work in the industry, either as a musician like you or as an attorney like me, because things are changing so quickly and the models are changing so quickly. I mean, even just within regular models, like when I started in this practice, everybody was talking about Kickstarter as the crowdfunding platform of choice. And now, people are talking about Patreon and how, what that could mean for artists and having a stable source of income for, a long period of time as you create multiple works. And I'm sure pretty soon there'll be something else that replaces it. Yeah. And it's an exciting time, but it's also a time that's challenging for you as artists, because you guys have to stay on top of your industry a lot more than people in other industries do. Because there's no industry that is changing as much as the entertainment industry is right now.
Yeah.
And, right now Twitch is the thing, and you guys are on Twitch and you're doing great things on it. And, 10 years from now, you're going to have kids and they're going to make fun of you for using Twitch because it's the old people platform. Yeah. Much how when I was in college, Facebook was where it was at, and that was the cool platform. And now, 10, 15 years later, I mean, I get made fun of by teenagers for still having a Facebook profile. So
yeah, I think
things move so quick.
One of my old students said, the minute the minute I saw my parents get on there, then it was totally not cool. And I was like,
that's right.
It's kind of true. Grandma, what are you doing on here?
Yeah. Oh, man.
It was like it was like our secret place, that we could do between each other.
Mark my words, 5 to 10 years from now, your Nana is going to figure out how to do a cover song on Twitch, and you're going to have to leave. And you're going to have to find the next cool platform to use.
But the fact that we're all connected by the internet, it is pretty crazy. And I could date myself too. I've been in the music industry for, my gosh, probably 18 years now. And I remember, going down to Hollywood and seeing a band or friends of ours, and they'd be like, all right, there's 8 A&R people here today. This is like early 2000s. And we were like, oh man, this is awesome. And now you go see a band and like an A&R, all the old A&R people that I knew are now realtors or accountants. Like that whole industry with labels and going out looking for talent and investing, that's all gone. It's like they're looking for quick ways to it's almost like they're drowning, and they're just trying to reach for whatever last thing they can before it's all done. It's a weird shift for me.
That's exactly what they're doing. The labels are drowning. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I sort of saw it because, I think when I was in high school, when, in like 2001, 2002, when everything started to collapse and over in 2000, the industry was at its peak. The music industry was more successful than the film industry was. I mean, it was everything. And then Napster happened and the revenues in the music industry collapsed to less than half of what they were at their peak. And, labels used to be these giant entertainment companies with a bunch of employees and a ton of A&R people. Yeah. And then, then all the A&R people got fired. And it used to be that labels developed artists. They'd get somebody who was, raw and had a lot of potential, and they'd fix them up and they'd make them great. And now they want turnkey properties. Labels expect you to come to them with the fan base already built, with the album already done, so that all the label has to do is just slap their name on your record and, get rich. And, that's great for the label, but it kind of makes you wonder, if you're doing all that work anyway, and you've already built yourself up, what in God's name do you need the label for?
Yeah, what are you benefiting from them for?
Yeah. Well, Steph, I don't know if you know 100%, but through like her time on Twitch, she's, developed she's a very good artist on her own, but she's written originals and she's crowdfunded the recording of her album, and that's going to be, it's something like the whole community that watches her is involved in, and she's doing it 100% on her own. 15 years ago, it would have been insane. You know, she would have had to find representation and, you know, have someone
and
deal
I don't
with
play
it.
live, and I have 2 kids. You know, in no other ecosystem, I feel, would this be possible.
Yeah. And you know, first of all, congratulations on all that. That's
Thanks.
What you're doing is exactly, you know, the kind of stuff that motivates me to keep doing what I'm doing. When I see people like you who've taken control of their careers, who have, you know, made great things happen. And look, the time is probably going to come for you where, you know, you're not going to be able to do everything yourself, and you probably do some amount of delegation. I think a lot of people, you know, think of the new music industry as the DIY model. Like, I'm doing everything myself as a musician. And that's just not true. It's not you know, I tell people, just because you're independent doesn't mean you're alone. Like, you're still going to need a team eventually. You might have people that are helping promote your work, and you might have people that help you record it. And you might even have a manager someday if you decide that's something you want. But the point is, in this industry, you can still have all those things, but you get to be at the top of the pyramid. You get to make the decisions for your career, as opposed to somebody else making those decisions for you and, you know, pocketing the last dollar.
Yeah, that was my next question, was for someone that is like Steph. There's a lot of people on Twitch that do original content and are putting out their own music and, you know, just doing it all 100%. What would be like a smart next step for them, professional, like maybe to branch out of that, like you said, do it yourself? What would be like someone to talk to, like a manager or representation, or any recommendations in that regard?
Yeah, a manager can be a valuable asset. And so, and let me just say this real quick, because I see a great point here in the chat here from Rose Dower in Space. Sorry, I'm always bad with these Twitch names.
Okay.
If I mispronounced your name, Mr. In Space, I'm sorry. But you know, it's a bring point, you know, which is saying that, you know, that I'm being sort of overly simplistic by saying you don't need a label. And look, I will, and you know, because I've heard that lament from many people who I talk to. And what I would say to you is, you know, what I was talking about before, like, you're not going to, you know, to get to the success you want in the music business, you might not be able to do everything yourself. That's okay. You might have to delegate. You know, you might have to bring on other people in your team. And instead of just being the person who does everything, you're just the boss of an organization that runs things. And, you know, that you can still do all those things. But when you have a label do those things for you, they're going to take way too much for it. They're going to own your copyrights. You know, they're going to control every aspect of your career. They're going to run your career in a way you don't want to. And honestly, like, take it from my experience on this, I've just seen it time and time again where that model has ruined people's lives.
Well,
and you know, you can really achieve that same kind of, you can really have that same kind of impact in your career and still have a team. But it's just so much better when you're the boss. So let me just say this real quick about managers. It gets back to what I said about managers. A lot of artists, you know, because managers can be a valuable person in your career, but you don't want to make the same mistake with managers that you might make with a record label. A lot of people think that the manager's job is to make you famous. Like, oh, I'm going to hire some manager who's going to connect me with the right people and, you know, put my career in the stratosphere. When that, usually in that arrangement, 99 times out of 100, the artist gets screwed. It is not a manager's job to make you famous. It is your job to make you famous. It is your manager's job to help you manage your fame once you have it. The manager is like the White House chief of staff. You're the president. They're the person that helps you run the team. But ultimately, you still have to be the person at the top who makes the decisions. And in a situation where you don't have that balance of power, and the manager is the person who owns you, I've seen a lot of artists get hurt by that. I mean, look at what happens with, you know, situations like Kesha and Dr. Luke, for example, if you want to see what can happen when you give a manager too much control.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned like all these things that you don't have control over. But one of the things that I've noticed so much with people that sign, with a label is time. They lose so much time because I'm very much a control freak. If I decide to do something, I'm immediate with it. I'm like, all right, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be bam, 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 and I'm going to want it done. Where a lot of the bands, that I know, they get signed, right? Let's say it is an okay deal, right? But with the industry changing, they'll record, let's say, and the label will sit on it. They might not release it. It's totally, the ball is, like you said, it's 100% out of their control. They are just there, like they made that record, and a friend of mine, they finally did release it, but it was like a year, that it was recorded, and he's like, I don't know if it's ever going to get released. And I've had that with other bands who had an amazing first record, right? And it released, sold millions of copies, and then they're like, all right, we're going to go in and record a second record, and they did, and it never gets released, and then they sit around for 5 years, like just at home going, what do? We can't, and legally they can't, as a band, do anything else because they're under, certain agreements with the label about what they can put out and what they can't.
It happens all the time. So, if we're sort of making our power rankings of all the things that suck about record deals, we got to put that on there, which is the fact that the label not only owns the record, but they control how it gets released, if it gets released, and whether it even gets made. And record deals are exclusive, which means you can only record for the record company. So this happens all the time, where an artist puts out a record, and then they want to put out record number 2, and they want to start recording, and the label says, nope. And then, and you say, well, can I record for somebody else? And they go, nope. And you're just sort of stuck, and they have you in limbo because the label gets to decide what your schedule is, and they can slow down a project, they can shelf you. And it happens all the time where you have artists who can't or aren't allowed to record because the label just decides it's not cost effective. But the label also doesn't want to let the artist out of the deal either, because God forbid that artist finds success with somebody else and makes the label look bad. And so you can have artists like your friends, as you were saying, who just sit around and are doing nothing. And look, the whole label model of like putting out an album every 2 years or, a year or whatever, in this industry is such a bad idea. And because as you guys are probably noticing, the new music industry is all about putting as much content out as possible. And often you're putting out new content regularly, every few weeks or every week, not once every couple years. Like, you need to keep putting music out so that your fans don't forget about you. That doesn't work in the record label model where you're putting out an album every 2 or 3 years. Like, in 2 or 3 years, people can forget completely about you. Like, you need to have full control over not just your music, but when it goes out and how it goes out. And a record deal just doesn't let you do that. And you need to have control over who you want to record with. You should be able to record with whomever you want, whenever you want. And, a record deal doesn't let you do that either.
Yeah, because I've seen the effects, and it kills these bands that are like, we want to do so much right now, and we can't. Like, they can't tour, they can't. They might play under a different name at like a small bar or something to get away with it, but
because they just want to make music.
They just want to do what they want to do, and they can't. And that was when I really started to go like, well, maybe I don't want this. Maybe what we're doing, we could try to do as much as we can on our own. But
let's be positive. What can labels do? They still have connections. I still would have never heard the Dresden Dolls if she hadn't signed with Roadrunner. I would have never heard Amanda Palmer if she hadn't. I don't think I would have, because I heard her on the radio. So what can labels do to make them more relevant and to make them more helpful in this ever-changing industry? What are some steps that, how could this improve if they still want to be relevant right now?
So labels are going to have to adapt, or they're going to die, because this same, the 1950s record deal just doesn't work anymore today. And if labels want, and yes, they can serve a purpose. They do help. They have broken lots of artists. They can provide some promotional help. They often provide some financial support for artists as well. But they're asking for way too much in return. And so the record label of tomorrow has to be a label that empowers artists, that lets artists keep their work and sees themselves as an advisor to an artist. Like we don't own you. We support you. We'll take a small fee for what we do, for the resources we provide. And, but you ultimately still get to make all the decisions for your career. And, we'll find a business arrangement that makes more sense. Like you give us a small percentage of what you make, like you do with a company like CD Baby or TuneCore, or, we come up with some kind of profit split, but ultimately you're still the boss. I have not seen that record deal. I've seen some that get close, but again, I've still not seen a record deal that I would ever advise a client to sign, because I just haven't seen one that's better than what you have now, which is full and complete independence and living in a world in which you have unlimited access to promotion, unlimited access to distribution, and through crowdfunding, unlimited access to funds in a way.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the label is a business too. So I guess something, if there was something wrong with quality, I'm just playing devil's advocate a little bit, because I'm working right now with a consultant. As you kind of, foreshadowed earlier, you said you might get to a point where you need help from other people and need to bring other people in to do things. And you're absolutely right, because I'm recording this summer and I want to promote things in a good way that makes sense. So I'm working with a woman who has established a firm that helps independent artists. She studied business strategy and then she went on to intern at a label. And she says, I just see them as my time there. They're not like evil people. They're just people that are they really do want to help artists, and they're just in a really tough spot. What's your take on that?
I have lots of friends who work with labels, and yeah, you don't get into the music business if you don't love music and you don't love musicians. And so, I do think there are some bad actors in that sector, but for the most part, I think really it's just a bad model that brings out the worst in the people who create. But ultimately, I think what you were sort of getting into was an interesting point, that you were saying that you were working with what sounds like a publicist or a PR agent that you have access to, that you were able to get because of what you achieved in your career, and you didn't need to go to a label to find that person. That you were able to get that person just by virtue of the success you've had, and that's great. We're approaching a world where all the things that a label does for an artist, you can now find as an independent musician and not give up your freedom. Yeah. And maybe labels will change what they do and make things more fair, but in the meantime, you can't wait for that as artists. You have to keep doing what you're doing and take advantage of all the great technology that's available to you to help you move your career forward. And again, as I say all that, I don't mean to discount how hard it is, because I know all of you are struggling, and I know it's a fight. And and as empowering as it is to be your own boss, I know it's also a lot of responsibility and it's tough. But believe me, it's possible. And this is such a great time to be making music, and the best music that's ever been made is being made right now.
Yeah, and what's really cool is there's bands and artists that are getting released from these old contracts that are expired. Like Kelly Clarkson's a really good example. Her latest record was insane. It was so good. And she's like, well, that's what I've been trying to make for the last 15 years, but I wasn't allowed to.
And by the by, Kelly Clarkson just got out of her American Idol deal.
Yeah. And that was 2001?
Right. You want to get an idea of how nasty record deals can be like that? Yeah, that agreement's like 17 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
a lot of time.
Yeah. And right. And she, and I agree with you. The album she put out, probably the best album she's ever made. Like the music on there is so much better because she doesn't have to go through a label's prism.
It felt like her. It felt like I was listening to her ideas and stuff, and not that her other stuff was bad, but you knew there was like a team of like 50 people that were making sure that got released a certain way.
They tried to make Kelly Clarkson the standard pop princess when she started out, and it never really fit for her. Mm-hmm. And she was talented enough that she still made a nice career out of it, but now she gets to be who she really is, and I think all of us as music fans get to benefit from that. But and that's something that labels do a lot, and that's another frustration I have with them, is they tend to try to they try to fit you into a box. And I've seen labels really ruin a YouTube stars' careers that way. There's an article, I think it was in Digital Music News, it came out a couple years ago. You guys can look it up, about an artist named Tara Naomi. Tara Naomi, yeah, I see Steph pointing. Tara Naomi was, basically the original YouTube star. Like, she was kind of the first artist to gain a following on YouTube, got millions of fans, and a record label took interest and signed her. And the first thing the record label did was try to make her a typical pop star. And they tried to put her in the pop star formula, where first thing they said to her was, no more YouTube videos. We're going to hide you away because we want to build like public interest in you. And, we're going to, promote you the same way we promoted Britney Spears and everybody else, by kind of, making you something that's more elusive and hard to get. And then, her album came out and it sounded like every other pop song on the radio, and they didn't let her make YouTube videos anymore. And, she faded away, and her career, suffered a huge setback, and eventually she was dropped from the label. And had they just, had they signed her and just said, keep doing what you're doing, Tara, keep making music on YouTube, keep building that fan base, they might have had something, but they're still kind of stuck in the old, kind of model. Mm-hmm. And, you saw it as well with, what's that band? Carmen. You guys remember them? Mm-hmm. It's the guy and the girl would spit ridiculous rhymes, even though she's like, white girl. Yeah. Carmen, and you're probably wondering, where the hell is Carmen now? That's a really, you want to know what happened? They signed a record deal, and a record label ruined their career.
Yeah.
Then their fans probably didn't appreciate, I'm sure the fans that helped, those artists get where they were and enjoyed their content probably didn't appreciate. I think, wasn't that article titled something like "A Record Deal Ruined My Career"? Or she titled it something, and I think she maybe even, they talked about how, the fans just, her supporters felt very betrayed.
Right. Oh, and you talk about the Tara Naomi example.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Because she sounded a certain way to them, and it sounded authentic. And the minute you go through that record label prism, you lose their authenticity. And all you guys who are making music independently right now, that authenticity is a really valuable asset. When people feel like they know you, like when people come on your Twitch stream and you say hi to them one by one because you have a relationship with them, and you've built that one-to-one fan connection, and they feel like they know you, that's a valuable authenticity. Mm-hmm. And when you try to become a traditional kind of record label artist, you're giving up a very valuable asset, and you can cause a lot of those initial fans to turn on you, especially if you start making music that doesn't quite sound like the stuff that you made, which maybe wasn't as good of quality because it wasn't made in a multi-million-dollar studio palace somewhere and wasn't made with the best producers in the world, but it was authentic because it was yours. Mm-hmm. And the moment that you kind of go the traditional route, you lose that authenticity.
Yeah. Well, even I was in a band once where we recorded with a producer, and it's not that we didn't have a say. Like, there was, we had talk about like, how the songs were going to be arranged, and stuff got changed, but ultimately we were really happy with what we did in the studio, but then it got sent off to a mixer. And we weren't allowed to be involved in that at all, and we get the finished product back. And I remember them saying, yeah, here you go. Here's your album. And there was all these extra parts added. And, it was like, wait, what? Like, this is not what we did. And I remember, in our local scene, people got excited, like, oh man, this is going to be really good. And then it comes back and people are like, what is this? When did you get an orchestra? What? Like, why is there, harps playing in your bridge of like this rock song? And we're like, I don't know, what are we going to do? You can't do anything. So it's like little things like that. It can, people notice. And that's one of the things that drew me to Twitch, I think, is you do have that connection. But I value so much to go into like someone like Steph's stream, and she's playing her songs, and I'm like, yeah, that's her. That's 100% her. That's, there's no one saying, you need to do something. And I respect that a lot. I think it's one of the magical fizzy bits of Twitch, and why I think people are being attracted to it. And like YouTube, to see a cover of someone or someone's original on Twitch or YouTube that's done right, you're like, man, that was awesome. I know
But it's difficult when you think about the longevity. We were having this discussion in the music Discord yesterday. Somebody was talking about rebranding, and then the discussion led to sort of platforms and shifting platforms. And I think it was Matricula that said, you can't marry a platform, you know? So all this work that you put into being on YouTube or being on Twitch, I feel as though there's this pressure to migrate all that somewhere neutral that's mine. And I've read, you know, Amanda Palmer talked about how her mailing list is like her bread and butter, that no matter where she goes, she'll always have her mailing list to communicate with people. Do you have any other suggestions or tips or advice for folks who really want to build something that's not reliant on a certain web platform?
She's 1,000% right there. And this happens all the time where an artist builds themselves up on a platform and relies heavily on that platform, and then the platform goes away, or just people migrate away from the platform, and then you've lost a lot of your fans. You know, that might happen with Twitch eventually. It already did happen with Vine. There were lots of artists who, you know, built their career making 6-second songs on Vine, had millions of followers, and then, you know, poof, Vine is gone. And so, as Amanda Palmer suggested, it is so important to have neutral real estate on the internet that belongs to you. And there's two platforms where that works the most. One is a website, having a good website that, you know, really investing in that website and, you know, have something that people will be driven to. And the other one, of course, is a mailing list. And, you know, I know when I say mailing list, I sound like, you know, get off my lawn grandfather. You know, it's like, oh, a mailing list, get out of here. No, but it's so important for two reasons. One, it's a permanent thing that belongs to you, so your mailing list is never going to go away. And plus, it gives you, at least for a brief moment when somebody's checking their email, you get a one-to-one connection with somebody where you're not competing with them on a Facebook page and they're looking at a bunch of posts at the same time. For at least a brief moment when they're looking at that email, they're just looking at you one-on-one. You have full control over what content you want to show them, and it's always going to be the best way to build a fan base. I still look at stuff on mailing lists a lot more than I look at stuff on Twitter or something like that. And it's not to say you shouldn't also develop these platforms well. If you're doing great things on Twitch, keep developing Twitch. I think it's a phenomenal platform and it's great for musicians. And I know a lot of musicians who are doing very well on it, but not at the expense of developing the stuff that truly belongs to you. Website, email list.
Thank you for answering that. One other thing I wanted to sort of bring back up again and reiterate, because some folks missed it, and then also segue a little bit, but, you know, folks asking about playing over backing tracks, that kind of thing. How is that any different from somebody playing a video game with copyrighted material and streaming it and not getting sued? Are the risks there the same? How far does fair use go? You know, and is fair use even taken into account when Dan is like drumming over a song and doing these amazing fills and interpretations? You know what I mean? Where is that even taken into consideration? Is there any protection there?
I heard two things there. So we'll start with streaming video games on Twitch, and you know, why might somebody be able to stream a video game on Twitch but not be able to play a cover on Twitch? And you know, the global answer to that is, you know, a video game is a copyrighted piece of content just like a song is, and if you don't have the permissions to use it, then you know, you could be, you know, liable for infringement. Now, what tends to typically happen in the video game world is a lot of video game companies love the fact that you guys are streaming you guys playing those games and essentially giving them free advertising. Yeah. You know, they love Twitch. They love Let's Play videos on YouTube. They love that stuff because it builds a community around their game and it helps advertise their game for free. So in many cases, a video game company is not going to stop you. And in fact, many video game companies on their websites even say, we are explicitly granting you permission to play our games on YouTube as long as you do certain things. They might want you to give them credit or, you know, not make a certain amount of money on it. You know, they might have different things like that. But for the most part, they love it because it's free advertising and it builds a community around their game. And a lot of artists might like the covers for the same reason, because it builds a community around you as an artist. You know, especially if you like retweet, you know, if you're Taylor Swift retweeting somebody saying, look at this person who did this cover of, a song of mine, it was so great. They do that all the time because it builds a community. But but the difference is, like, if they're okay with it, they're not going to come after you, but it's still infringement if they're not okay with it. And specifically, if you're playing a backing track on a recording, the same thing might happen. Like, there are sometimes like Guitar Hero type games where you might be playing Guitar Hero and you're playing a song on Guitar Hero, and the audio and the video is still there because Guitar Hero has no problem giving free advertising, but the audio is gone because the person who owns the master has, hit you with a content ID DMCA takedown. So that can happen sometimes too. Now, fair use. I heard that lovely 2-word phrase pop into here. I hear fair use all the time. Everybody thinks they know what fair use is, and this is fair use and that is fair use. And let me tell you, as somebody who, literally wrote their law school dissertation on fair use and works with fair use all the time, nobody knows what the hell fair use is. Okay? There is no like scroll that lists that's anywhere that specifically says this is fair use and this is not fair use. Fair use is a 4-factor test that's in Section 107 of the Copyright Act. You can read it, and by the time you get to the 4th factor, you're going to fall asleep because it doesn't make any sense. And really, it's just what any judge thinks fair use is. And one judge's fair use is another judge's infringement. And it's not something that you ever want to rely on, even if you think that something is fair use, because in many cases, even if you had a decent fair use argument, the only way you can use fair use is if somebody sues you and then you use fair use as a defense. And by the time you've already gotten sued, you've already lost. So fair use might protect you, but it's not something that you really want to hang your hat on because it's a very muddy doctrine and it depends on which judge you get. And, you're better off just trying to get into a situation where you have the rights to use what you're using.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for answering that. I appreciate that. Do we have any, should we take some questions, do you think, from the chat? What do you think, Dan?
I saw so many good questions and I felt bad ignoring all of them.
Yeah, guys, please ask.
We
have Ryan here, and I want everyone to take full advantage if they have questions.
Yeah, please do. Some of the stuff we did cover earlier a little bit, so maybe going back and listening to the VOD, like Raji's asking, the difference between a live performance and the recorded VOD and those type. That was essentially, we discussed the 2 types of copyright license, or the 2 types, right? The performance and mechanical, is that right? Or
well, that's right. And if you're just performing something on live stream, theoretically, you might only need a performance license for that. But when you are fixing that work onto a actual downloadable thing, now you're talking about additional rights: a mechanical license, a synchronization license to sync the audio with the video, and you're going to need more permissions for that.
Yeah.
One thing I've always known about the copyright thing, but Twitch is monetized, and just like YouTube, let's say you do something here on Twitch, or you do a cover, and it blows up, right? Let's say it goes viral. Let's say Steph does a Taylor Swift cover and it goes insane, like millions and millions and millions of views. People are watching it. There's ads beforehand. She's getting sub revenue. She's getting tips from it, all this. And the artist sees that and goes, hey, what's going on here? That to me is, it is like this. Everyone knows that it's going on. Like, no one's a blind eye. The people that wrote these songs aren't like, wait, people are covering my songs. Like, everybody knows that they're doing it. But, it might only take that one artist having a bad day to go, hey, no, that's mine and I want it. Like that. Do you know what I mean? Like how. And
sometimes it's not even the artist. There was an incident recently with Ed Sheeran where this girl put out this Ed Sheeran cover and, it got a takedown notice. And then all these people who really liked that cover, started tweeting at Ed Sheeran, like, what the hell, Ed? And Ed came out and he's like, I don't even know what this was. Like, that wasn't me. It was the label and the publishing company. Yeah. You can cover whatever the hell you want. Like, I love you guys. I'm Ed Sheeran. But, and so that can happen. Like, what does Ed Sheeran care? Like, he wants the free advertising. But sometimes the people who actually own the copyright, i.e., label and publishing company, might have different things for what you want. But conceivably, yes, the more successful your video becomes, if it becomes more viral, there's a greater likelihood you're going to get caught. Most of your covers are never going to get taken down because nobody will ever find out. It's like a tree falling in the forest kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if it takes off and goes viral, then, if somebody doesn't want you playing it, it's more likely that you might get served with a takedown notice or your account might get deleted.
Mm-hmm.
I really kind of like what you mentioned earlier where, you were saying things are shifting in the next 5 to 10 years. People aren't going to be so concerned about that. They're not going to want to put things on lockdown and hide it and make it exclusive and say, okay, you give me money and now you can have my art. This model of just putting the art out there, giving people the art and letting people enjoy the art, which that's very important to me in general. I don't want to have to be tit for tat. And I've noticed that when you just show up and give it to the people and give the people a chance to find you, and then they will give back to you if they can and want to.
Oh, yeah.
If you never even ask them for anything. And it's just interesting. It's interesting how this has shifted. And I'm just wondering, will music as a whole catch up to this video? Will they look at the video game industry as a model? Because this is the largest video game industry now. That's the largest entertainment industry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You think that they'll look at that as a model?
I think they will, because the music industry. Because conventionally the way people think of music industry is record labels and publishing companies, but I've been working with independent artists for so long that I don't see them as the industry anymore. You guys are the industry, and you guys are young and you're sophisticated and you play video games and you're on YouTube and you're on social media and you know the latest in technology. And so you're going to be the ones who, are more nimble in making that shift, and those big companies aren't going to be able to shift as quickly. So you're going to be leading the way on this. And I think what we're going to start to see more and more is that the line between television and music and movies and video games, like, it's all blurring.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you have an artist who, and I see them out there who make music, but then they also have like funny videos that they put out, and they do like, segments where they teach stuff, and here's me cooking some stuff, and here's me playing with my friends, and here's a funny video of it. I mean, is that person a musician? Is that person an actor or actress? Are they a comedian? Like, think of somebody like Ali Spagnola, for example, is a good example of this. She's an artist, but she makes comedic videos. She sells like merchandise, like with, little shot glasses on it. And she does like all this sketch comedy. I don't know what the hell you'd consider her anymore, but that's really the shift, is that, good content is good content, regardless of the medium or multiple forms of media that you're using. And, how exciting is that? That's,
I don't know if
you guys are disrupting every industry.
Yeah. I don't know if I talked about it on here, but I did my taxes a couple of weeks back, and this was my first year. Yeah, I know. But like, this is my first year doing, Twitch. I started last year, so I, explained to, my accountant what it was, and they're like, "Oh, so you're an influencer?" And I was like, okay, because they don't even know. I'm like, what how do I deal with this? And they're like, we're just going to put down influencer, and we did some other things to kind of set it up for the future, but it was like, there is no like, oh, you're a streamer. Like you said, you can't check all like 20 different things when you're filing and stuff. So he's just influencer, musician influencer kind of thing.
And don't feel like you have to stay in a box. Like, staying in a box is what record labels do when they try to make Kelly Clarkson sound like, Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. Like, you get to fully control what kind of artist you want to be. And that can change over time. Like, maybe now you just want to make music and later you want to do something else. And, as long as your tribe is willing to follow you wherever you go, like, go nuts, be whatever kind of artist you want to be. Like, isn't that really what all artists want, is just to have full creative control over what they do and, go on their own creative journey? Like, you can do that now. You couldn't do that 20 years ago.
Yeah. I haven't met one artist that is like, can you just tell me what to do? I honestly never have.
Independent.
Well, they're out there. They're just not very successful anymore.
Yeah.
Because there's like a lot of independent labels. There was one I was looking at a while back, and I was like, boy, I would really love to be in with that group. They don't record anything. They don't even have a studio, but this particular label sort of acted as a hub where it's like they adopt you as a brand and help promote you among their existing community, but they don't really seem to provide much beyond that. Are independent labels an effective model still, or helpful? And how do they differ from like the big labels?
Well, that's a good question. And really, there's so many different versions of what an independent be. I mean, I've seen independent labels that that call themselves independent because they're not affiliated with Universal, Warner, or Sony, but they act just like a traditional label and have all the same crappy contracts that a traditional label does. But I've also seen ones that, are more basically just like an artist collective, where like they don't really have like a lot of infrastructure, and they're not going to take a lot from you, but it's just a bunch of artists getting together and making music as a collective. And then you have some in the middle. And I've talked to, I had on my podcast Portia Sabin from Kill Rock Stars on a podcast a couple years ago, and we had sort of a fight about record labels because we're obviously of different minds of it. And what she tried to say to me was, look, like my company is understands like where the traditional labels have gone wrong, and we're trying to do something different. We don't pay the artist a royalty. We share the profits with the artist. Like we take all the money that came in, and then after we pay our costs, then we split the money 50-50 with the artist. It's a true business partnership, and the artist keeps some control. And, I haven't read a Kill Rock Stars contract beginning to end, so I can't say, yes, that's great, or, no, that's terrible. But I will say it sounds a lot better than a traditional record deal as an independent label. But would I still accept a 50-50 kind of split over what an artist has now, which is full control over their career and they're the boss and they own their masters? I still think the indie route might be better.
I think for somebody that has a little bit of a smaller following, for me, I feel like indie's better because I want to own my publishing rights.
Oh, God, yes. Especially if you're talking about the newest way that, artists are making money these days, which is sync placements. Where you get your song in a commercial or a TV show or a video game. Sync in video games has gotten really cool lately. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of money in that because you get paid twice. You get paid both on the sync fee when the initial commercial is made, and then you get performance royalties when the song is played on television. And if you can get a commercial that really takes off, that can be a nice chunk of change for an artist. But you don't get any of that if you don't own your publishing. Yeah. And luckily there are companies like Song Trust and CD Baby has its own publishing arm as well that are publishing administrators where they don't own your copyrights. What they do is they just go and collect all your performance royalties and your mechanical royalties. They take a small piece, like 15% or whatever, and then you keep the rest and you still own your copyrights. Like that, to me, is a much better scenario.
Yeah. Do you think in the future there will be like a copyright reform just because of how different the landscape is?
Yes. Copyright gets reformed all the time. Usually every 20 years, there's a big reform. Actually, there's a copyright reform going through Congress right now. And the last big one was 98, 20 years ago. There you go.
Okay. Yeah.
But what this copyright reform is mainly doing, trying to help people get songwriters get paid more on streaming services and to reduce the legal liability of streaming services when they play songs on Spotify and things like that. And it's it's called the Music Modernization Act. To talk about it would require a whole other Twitch session, but artists should read up on it because it's going to affect all of you as songwriters, especially if you're putting your music on Spotify. That legislation is going to be very relevant to you, and you're going to have to do some very important things on that if that law gets passed. But yes, there's always going to be copyright reform, but I guarantee this: the reform is never going to be enough to catch up to what you artists are doing, because every time a law gets passed, it becomes obsolete pretty quickly. I'll give you the best example. This is an old example, but it's a good one. It used to be that the biggest concern that the music industry had was people taping songs off the radio. People was like, that taping songs off the radio is going to destroy the recording industry. Dead, because people can tape songs off of radio with these newfangled tape recorders. And so they made Congress pass an act called the Audio Home Recording Act, which put in like a little tax on tape recorders to help compensate the music industry for people taping songs off the radio. And people thought like, oh, the music industry is saved. Like we fixed the biggest problem. And then of course, like within a few years, like no using tape recorders anymore. But that gives you an idea of what Congress is like. Congress is always going to be a generation behind on copyright law. So don't look to Congress to save you. Both in copyright or really in anything, frankly. But you guys are always going to be faster than the people you elect into office.
Yeah. So Raji wants to know, does copyright law apply to the platform you stream on or the country in which you live?
Does copyright law apply on these the answer is both. Conceivably, if your music is being broadcasted into another country, that country's law could apply in that country, and it certainly applies in the law that in the area that you're streaming from. But really, you got to be mindful of all those laws. Use stuff without permission, or you're going to be in a position where you get caught and get in trouble.
Yeah. So I've got a question. How important is it for an independent artist to register with a performing rights organization? So
incredibly important. Because your songs might, first of all, if your songs are on a streaming platform like Spotify or Pandora, those are performance royalties that you're missing out on if you're not registered with a PRO. If your songs are being played on, in clubs or on the radio, there's performance royalties that you're missing out on there. And the only way you get those royalties is if you have a PRO that's collecting on your behalf. So ASCAP and BMI are the two big ones. CSAC is big too, but that generally is by invitation only. If you sign up with a publishing administrator like Song Trust, and you don't have a PRO yet, they'll actually help you set one up. And the publishing administrators like Song Trust can also set you up with PROs around the world, so that if your music is being performed in other countries, they'll collect those royalties for you there as well. If you're writing a lot of music, you need to get somebody collecting your publishing royalties, like a publishing administrator. It is an absolute must, because there are performance royalties and mechanical royalties, by the way, which you could be missing out on if you're not getting those royalties collected.
Okay, so a brief checklist of some helpful things we've got to do as independent artists is we've got to register with the Copyright Office.
Register your songs in the Copyright Office, absolutely.
Join a PRO, Performing Rights Organization,
and
register your works with them.
Right. There's a little list where you'll put all your songs in, and you'll tell them what the splits are, so who owns what percentage of each song you've written.
Consider establishing a mailing list or website or some other independent way to stay in contact with your fans. Is there anything else that you can think of that maybe we didn't have time, we didn't talk about, but you wanted to mention?
Ooh, so many things, and I'm sure I'm going to miss, I might miss some here.
We'll have to have you back on sometime.
I would love to come back on. You guys are fabulous. Awesome too. They asked such great questions, and it was criminal that I saw a lot of them go by and I didn't answer them, and I'm so sorry. But I'll say this for the listeners. My email address is breakthebusiness@gmail.com. If you have any questions that you want me to answer, I answer every email that comes in, breakthebusiness@gmail.com. And I won't use this as a way to plug my podcast, because I'm sure that'll come later, but that's where you can email me for now, breakthebusiness@gmail.com. But some of the other things you might want to do, if you have not done this already, you want to make sure you're getting your music distributed. So you need a music distributor to do that. So to get your songs on Spotify, Pandora, iTunes, for the 5 minutes that it has left, you want to get a platform like CD Baby is good, TuneCore is good, and there's a lot of other ones out there that are pretty good as well. The main difference between CD Baby and TuneCore is TuneCore, you're paying more up front. They're actually going to charge you more for actually putting your song out there. CD Baby, it charges you less up front, and it's going to take a royalty for itself, like 10% of all the money you make. So really what it gets down to is, if you're making a lot of money off your recordings, you're that's a big revenue stream for you, then you might want to look at a platform like TuneCore, where you're just going to pay money up front. But if you're dealing in smaller quantities, which many artists are in the streaming world, you want to go with something like CD Baby, so that you're not, bankrupting yourself on the front end. But definitely those kind of music distribution services are critical, because even if you're just a Twitch artist, and you're just playing your music on Twitch, it's always it's good to just have a presence on Spotify or Apple Music or iTunes, just so if people want to get your music in those areas after listening to you crush it on Twitch, they have those opportunities for themselves.
Yeah.
So that's a big one for sure, is, register the copyrights, get yourself a publishing administrator, get set up with the PRO, mailing list, website, YouTube account. Even if it's not your bread and butter, a lot of people discover artists on YouTube. And if you're making all these great Twitch videos, hosting them on YouTube could be a great thing to do as well. You can also put your music on YouTube and just give people another way to discover your music. Social media is important as well. You don't have to be on every type of social media, but if you can have at least a decent presence on a couple that you think your fans are on, like Twitter, and interact with people effectively, that's always huge. And when I say interact with people on social media, like really interact with them, build one-on-one relationships, talk to people with direct messaging. Don't just tweet, buy my album, buy my album, buy my album. You will get hated very quickly by your fan base.
Check out my album.
Check out my album. Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of like the old like MySpace days. I remember like bands that's all you would see bands do is like, we're playing here and here and here and here and here. And no one ever, like, no other things were posted aside from like, listen to us, come see us play.
Here I am, you're welcome. It doesn't really work like that.
Yeah, I just remember opening up MySpace and it was just like 100 bands like, we're playing here tonight. And I was like, I don't care. Like that's the truth. I mean, there was an oversaturation of promotion. So yeah, that communication and that genuinity, I don't know if that's a word, but just being genuine with people. Yeah.
Build real relationships with your fans, even if you're dealing in smaller quantities, and it's going to pay off for you. And I mean, it's just so much better that way. I mean, I like, with Steph and Dan, you guys, like, I imagine the success you're having is not just because people dig your music, but they got to know you and they dig you. You've whether intentionally or not, you've let them get a window into your life, and they feel like they know you. They feel like they're your friend. And it's you're going to get much stronger support that way than just somebody where it's like, oh, I dig their music, but I don't really know them that. And so the more that you as an artist can let people have a window into your life, the better off you're going to be. So that's why, like, talking to them on Twitch, where you can have real conversations with them and build real fan relationships, and show you not just making music, but show you, going to the beach with your friends and, hanging out and just, doing things that a normal person does, so that people can people can identify with you.
Yeah.
And get to know you as a person. Like, that's something you couldn't do 20 years ago. And the fact that you can do it now allows you to really benefit a lot in this industry.
Yeah. I remember years ago, when I would do concerts and stuff, I'd go out and I'd want to be like, hey, I'm just going to go out and like talk to people. I'm going to go to our merch table. And I remember other bands would be like, you can't do that. You don't go out there and talk to people. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I wanted to, and there's this.
They're the competition.
Yeah, it was weird, but it's like all the bands that are still around were the ones, in my opinion, the ones that made that effort to go out and sit there for 2 hours and sign T-shirts. Or, just hang around in the parking lot while people went home and said, yeah, thanks for coming. Like, that kind of stuff means a lot to people. And it's the same thing like on Twitch. If you get invested in the viewers, it shows, that they keep coming back.
No, it absolutely. And it's easier than ever to do now that you have social media. Like, you don't have to just wait in the club and wait and try to talk to everybody who came to the club. Now the club got billions of people in it, and you can talk to anybody whenever you want on social media. You can talk and you can make friends all over the world on Twitch, and you can really benefit from that. And kudos to you guys for seeming to figure that out and building your career accordingly. There are a lot of artists who are still in the old world who haven't quite got that yet. Yeah. And they're finding themselves spinning their wheels and saying that, oh, if I can just find a record label to save me, then that's all I'll need. Yeah. No, you make your own success, and it sounds like that's what you guys are doing, and that's really exciting.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
I started doing it for fun, and it evolved. So I don't know. It's one of those things where when you just bring yourself and put your art out there, it's nice that we have Twitch as a place where people can receive you, for you, like you said. So
yeah. Well, Ryan, please plug your book again one more last time and where people can find you. Yeah.
And your Twitter.
Sure. My book is Break the Business, Declaring Your Independence, Achieving True Success in the Music Industry. If you just search Break the Business on Amazon, it comes up. It's available in paperback, ebook, and if you are not tired of this voice, it's also available in audiobook.
Nice.
And you can give it a listen there. It's a year old or a year or two old now, but it's still, the concepts in there are still important.
Mm-hmm.
And, thankfully it hasn't gotten obsolete or close to obsolete yet. But aside from that, we also have the podcast, which has been running for 2 or 3 years now, called the Break the Business Podcast. That's available on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud. We've done 122 or 23 episodes. So
nice.
A lot of great advice on there. We've interviewed everybody.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
We've interviewed the CEO of Patreon. We've interviewed the CEO of Noise Trade. We've interviewed a bunch of people from CD Baby and TuneCore. And we've interviewed publicists. We've interviewed top indie artists. We've interviewed Grammy winners. And we've gotten a lot of great advice along the way. And we talk a lot about Twitch. We've had a few Twitch-specific episodes because you guys have been crushing it so much on Twitch as a community that I felt like we've had to have some people on to talk about that.
Yeah, so you had Mary Amber on. Oh,
Mary's the best. Speaking of somebody who's crushing Twitch, she was actually the very first guest I had on the podcast. It's very hard to get the first guest on a podcast because nobody knows who you are yet. But she was such a sweetheart that she was willing to come on, and she's the best. I adore her. If you want just a masterclass in how to run every aspect of your music career effectively, just check out what she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
MERI Amber. She is great on Twitch and great on pretty much everything else too.
Yeah,
those are the places you can find me.
Too.
What's that?
We featured her on our podcast too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she's the best. You can, I encourage you to follow me on Twitter at Ryan Kair, RYANKAIR. Break the Business is on Facebook as well. You just search Break the Business. But and of course, you can email me at breakthebusiness@gmail.com. I'd love to continue to talk with you guys, answer any questions you have. I consider it a big professional obligation of mine to help indie artists like you move your careers forward. And I'm happy to help if I can.
Yeah.
Well, we thank you for your time.
Yeah, we really do appreciate your time. And I just want to encourage anybody, the offer that, like he said, just reach out to him whenever. I can't tell you how valuable that can be if you ever get in a position. I've scrambled to try to talk to people in the past about, opportunities that arose. So, always feel free to ask questions and to educate yourself about the business of music, because you get to a point where it is going to become a business. It could be the thing that feeds you and, takes care of you. So you really got to respect that animal that it is. And the more you know about it, the better off you'll be in the long run. So again, Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to us. It means a lot.
It was my pleasure. This was so much fun. Thank you all very much.